Hey everyone, Hazza here. Welcome back to my YouTube. Another day, another Pick'ems video. It's the Champions Paris playoff stage, so it's time to lock in our picks and see who we think is going to take home the crown jewel of Valorant for 2025. Now, to quickly check back in as to where we landed coming out of the group stage, we got a nice little percentage for ourselves, but playoffs is where you make up the difference, and how I've been able to get that gold buddy for the last two events that we've been able to do picks in, starting back with Champs last year. To quickly summarize how the group stage ended up going for us, these were the picks that we made, and other than a huge blunder in Group C, I'm pretty happy with my overall decisions. I did get slightly mocked by someone in the comments section who had seen all of the possible realities and somehow knew that XLG were going to beat Sentinels, but GiantX moving through was a surprise choice for some, I suppose, and where we managed to haul some extra points that we otherwise lost by undervaluing DRX specifically. I think with the player change, I wasn't expecting them to do as well as they did, but lo and behold, they make it through. RRQ, it just wasn't their event, and it hasn't been all year. Internationals, not their scene, apparently, and a little bit more experience required. And speaking of experience, Heretics great in those positions. Looked very well prepared in comparison to a T1 team, which I was kind of hoping to see a little bit more from. Pretty one-dimensional. Kind of in the name, I guess. I was disappointed with their performance. That's how groups ended up going, though. And we actually watched almost all of these games live on stream, not just on Twitch, but on my YouTube right here as well. So if you guys are interested in following along with the action as it unfolds, hit the subscribe button and press the bell for notifications as to when I go live. And so with all of that out of the way, and just over 48 hours till that first game goes live, we're going to jump into the playoff bracket and start making some picks. Beginning with FNATIC versus DRX, a match which we've seen take place in Champs over the last 4 years, and FNATIC only picking up one win back in 2023 with that legacy roster which received 2 titles in a year, Lock-In and Masters Tokyo. Are they anywhere near the same kind of trophy lifting level that we've seen in years gone by? I don't think so. Not at least until later in the competition where maybe they can gain some form. Kayak, a player who I highlighted in that group stage run going into things that we needed to see step up to the level we know he's capable of. There's that extra little bit at the top of his game which I think he needs to unlock if FNATIC are going to be a serious contender to lift the Champs trophy for the first time. We saw some fantastic performances from players like Crashies, who has typically struggled in Champions gone by, and even Boaster, hard carrying his team against RRQ at the end of that series on Abyss when they required him most. But we're not just thinking about FNATIC here, we've also got to be thinking about DRX, and looking at their map pool and what they've shown, I'm a really big fan of this Waylay meta read that they currently have. We've started to push in a different direction now heading into Champs, with Abyss coming back in being one of their best maps, I think looking like maybe the best Abyss team in the tournament at this point in time, and also a Corrode which has been kind of here and there because I think they did massively misplay it against NRG. It felt like they threw that series away when it was theirs for the taking. I don't feel completely confident in them for some reason, and maybe this is the EMEA bias creeping back in, but it's a fool's game to try and predict how any of these games are going to go, and to be honest, I leaned away from what my heart was telling me previously and it didn't work out. I'm going to go for FNATIC in this opening game. Feel like they're prepped, they've got momentum at their backs. DRX had some shoddy moments in an otherwise pretty secure run into the playoff stage, but I think it's got to be FNATIC this time. If there was any opportunity for them to rewrite history on home soil at an EMEA event, the one time they don't do well domestically in a stage 2 coming into a Champs might just be the perfect red carpet to roll out and actually see them win something. So at least to kick things off, I have them in the upper bracket, not something which we've been all too used to when they're facing against a Pacific opponent in the first round. Next up is the big one that everyone will be talking about, PaperX versus G2. Now I have to say very quickly, G2 looked pretty convincing in that final game that they ended up showing us in their group against T1. a rematch of the Bangkok Grand Final with tempers flaring on either side of the server. I should say more specifically, G2 instigating pretty heavily against a T1 which looked tilted by the end of the day. However, I think that's a massive win for them. Not just to get revenge, but also build up a little bit of fire within the camp, which otherwise I think they would have been feeling very deflated coming out of that Heretics game. They looked second best, and honestly, I thought that there was a serious chance that T1 might have just snuck in, but it comes back to what I said before, looking a little bit more underdeveloped. This is a G2 team, however, that have carved out a very niche, I suppose, but specific style that works for them. It's still keeping the Teho in the compositions. It's playing Jaw on Yoru as much as you possibly can, and actually lifting those ideas from maps which we've seen them play, like Bind, for example, or their Lotus, and patching it directly into their Corrode, where we actually saw them succeed for once, moving away from the Sage and some of the other stuff that wasn't really working for them before, or at least hadn't since they were playing it regionally in Americas. So I think there are actually reasons to believe that they could come into this series and win it. It's not as clear-cut as the Toronto champs walking into that second round with ease. But when you look at how PaperX have been performing on the whole, I feel like the elevation that we've seen of this team in their gameplay since having Patmen come in and give them a much higher floor has made me feel that much more solid about them, especially some of these group stage games. They looked so well versed in how to deal with what GiantX were doing, some of their set pieces, how exec heavy they could be at times. Is that clash with G2 going to work as well as they would like to? Well, we've seen it happen before already. I think they're going to be in a much better position coming into this game, and while DRX maybe for some would be favorites as the Pacific team in the other one, I think PRX have to be here as well, giving us a pretty nice matchup in the upper bracket. One which I've predicted over the years multiple times. It's never really happened. We might be getting it here. Onto the flip side of the bracket, and the slightly weaker of the two, I think the general consensus is when you look at some of the heavy hitters that we have here between our first four teams. Heretics presented with a huge opportunity to move on in the upper bracket early doors against an MIBR which fought tooth and nail to get through, but otherwise completely washed teams on some maps. Think of their bind against FNATIC. FNATIC weren't at the races, they weren't shooting, but they absolutely demolished them. RRQ put to bed very quickly by Aspas having strong individual performances, but not just the Aspas that we knew before without a supporting cast. Verno calling as an in-game leader in English on a Portuguese-speaking Brazilian team, but when thrown into a clutch and left to his own devices, also showing how credible and capable he is for them. Genom, Artzin, Cortesia, all of them putting in big work and having standout moments throughout the different series that they played. And sometimes that's all you need. If your individuals are stepping up, then you can still be at the level. I wouldn't say the macro has been like thoroughly impressive, but the broader perspective of how they're setting up round to round does look pretty decent. And when it comes down to the finer details and the gunplay, then absolutely they're there. A couple of mistakes here and there, but other than those rough bits around the edges, I'm fairly convinced with this team. Heretics, on the other side, have potentially put themselves in a little bit of hot water. Comments made all the way back in April from Benji and Rian saying that Aspas is a beta have definitely got the Brazilian fans riled up. They considered him to be an overrated player in VCT. Not that he's a bad player by any means, but I think there are going to be some emotional stakes to this game which otherwise may get overlooked. Now, do I think that that's going to play into MIBR's hands? Absolutely. But Heretics have been on these big stages before. They know how to play them. They've gone through 2-0 without dropping a single map in groups and played quite a limited pool as well. So they haven't actually shown us some of the other maps that they have historically been good on before, such as Abyss, for example. We're still yet to see that. Their Corrode looks pretty good though, and I think against MIBR that's going to be a big point in the veto that we'll have to consider. Now, has their bind improved enough to be on the same level? I'm not too sure. These are other areas that we're going to have to definitely assess, but I'll keep the EMEA bias going. It's fine. I'll hold my hands up. We move Heretics through into the next round, but keep your eyes on MIBR, I guess. NRG GX. Now, where do I put this one? I was impressed with NRG's run throughout the groups. I'll say it as it is. I think that they surprised a lot of people by making it through. A lot of people were also very high on them, though, and holding them in that kind of estimation when you consider that they've come out of Americas, which is a region which gets a lot of hype in general. GX, on the other hand, were pretty much the answer to everyone in EMEA's problems because they finally proved that we do have a little bit more depth. Now, sure, the Liquid fall-off was not something that people were too happy about in general, but why is it that GX managed to survive where Liquid maybe didn't? Because they have a set identity for themselves. They've got a certain way that they want to play. I do feel like it has been somewhat sussed out, and you saw that in the Paper X game, and I mentioned it earlier. My example will be some of their eco rounds or their ult rounds where they want to make pacey takes on their attack side, specifically Sunset. Paper X immediately starting with like 3 players market, for example, to stop that split push and making sure that something is checking the top mid smoke because he knows that Grubby's going for the double TP. This is where elite teams are going to shut you down. If they can read how it is your game plan looks or specific rounds that they like to play, that's my slight concern. You do have some very good coaching staff on NRG as well that should be able to figure that out. But with how closely cut some of those results were for NRG on their maps specifically, in the EDG game, all the overtimes against DRX as well, just squeezing past them, where I felt like DRX really should have won that game. I'm going to lean into GX. I've put every single EMEA team through in the upper bracket, and I may come on to regret this, and the GX NRG is the one that I'm going to stick to as being like my true upset result, because I don't think any of these other ones could potentially be too surprising. I think I've gone with the favorite in kind of the majority of these games, at least I would say. Alright, so I've gotten out of the way my general thoughts and feelings about each of the teams heading into these matchups, what the histories look like for them in groups. Now we're going to speed things up a bit and actually lock in what the rest of this bracket looks like, because we don't have too much time. You guys have got to do your picks as well. Let me know in the comments who you end up going with, because we had some pretty good predictions last time, and I want to know if mine matches up with what everyone else is thinking, because to me, this feels like one of the most competitive, most open brackets that we've seen in Champs in a long time. First game, FNATIC versus Paper X. Who do I have going through here? Has to be Paper X. Upper bracket, Champs, it's what they do. Think back to 2023. This team is in fine form at the moment. They've got the depth, they have the individual skill, the floor is high enough. I feel like even on a bad day, you're still going to get a decent performance out of this team that can compete with some of the best that we have. For FNATIC, they live life in the lower bracket. That is where they'll probably want to be, getting additional reps, the same way that the Toronto run was built for a potential rematch at the end of the gauntlet. Next up, Heretics GX, an EMEA head-to-head in that second round. How likely do I really think this is? Do I really have GX beating NRG? I can't go back on myself now. I got to double down. Honestly, I reckon it's got to be Heretics, though. Part of me would just want to keep that Cinderella run going, kind of like a Wolves-Toronto vibe where GX get up to here and then maybe they drop off and we see them end in the lowers and that's how it finishes. But honestly, got to be Heretics. I think I see them moving through into this next game with Paper X. They just have the quality. It's a domestic matchup, and I feel like that completely changes the scope of how the match feels. It's an isolated instance, of course. At the end of the day, if you don't show up in this match, then yeah, you could be facing the lowers, but I think Heretics just have that little bit more quality. I think they have a bit more variance in how they're able to play, whereas on the other hand, GX have a very specific style of play, which Heretics should be aware of, more than aware of at this point in time, because they've faced many times regionally already from the first into the second stage of this year. Down to the lowers, DRX G2, MIBR, NRG. This EMEA bias Paris bracket has put me in a very sticky situation where I have to send a couple of these teams home already. But this is the gambit, right? This is the play that we make to try and get the picks back on track. Honestly, I think it has to be G2 at this point. DRX, there is weakness there. They have looked really nice with the Waylay. There are some slightly bigger problems with this team, I think, in terms of how readable they're going to become as the tournament continues to move onwards. And while G2 may take this loss and feel a little bit frustrated, I believe they still do have the momentum in the camp to keep them going at least to a lower semi or something of that sort. MIBR versus NRG, these teams have played each other a few times already this year, but since the newer version of NRG that we've ended up seeing, they have looked better on the whole. While I'm saying that, do I really believe they can keep things going? I don't know, man. I'm still convinced that the MIBR that we've seen is one that has a lot of potential. And if I were to pitch these two directly against each other, for some reason, I feel like MIBR is still the slightly better team. And I'll actually have a rematch between them and FNATIC come up later on in the bracket. I don't know. I'm sorry, NRG guys. From watching that group stage, some of the maps felt a little bit too close. And I'm just not a believer. I don't know why. I don't believe. Maybe it's because Strong spoiled the result of the Norwich game on my birthday when I was having a nice day kayaking in the ocean. I don't know why he would choose to do that. I'm definitely not holding any kind of a grudge when I hold this one over his head. But I'm going MIBR here, man. I think they're a little stronger. Why not? Why not? Hey, no bias, no bias. All right, on to the upper final. You saw there, I'd gone with Paper X. Honestly, I think I'm going to just stick with them here. They look pretty comfortable. When they have an upper run going, they make it to the final. It's as simple as that. These guys win those matches and put themselves in those positions. Think back to Copenhagen in 2022. Think to Champs in 2023. And think to Champs again in this year. Well, oh, and Toronto, of course. I've just skipped one, but you get the point, right? When Paper X are playing at their best, they will have the advantage until those best of fives, where things can get a little bit more interesting. I have to say, Forsaken is looking like the best fragging IGL in the world at the moment. Valen had his moments, but I still have him as #1. So much flexibility, so many options. Heretics, on the other hand, the fact they've managed to cobble together this run is already looking pretty good for them. But they're another team that likes to do well in the lowers, and we'll get onto that in just a sec. Next game, G2 versus GX. I think G2 probably have a little bit more quality than GX at this stage in the competition. I would have them over this team by the time you get to this point. By the time you get to a lower semi, for example, a similar position that they found themselves in the previous event. FNATIC MIBR. We've already seen this happen once. Is this the sort of match that FNATIC end up losing in Champs? Yeah, this is the kind of game where they get eliminated. At least it has been for the last 4 years. I don't know. It's what we've come to expect from them, right? Like, you get a nice little run towards the start and you're thinking, hey, maybe something's going to happen. They get into the lowers and there's that one team that maybe just has a slightly better map pool, or, like a Sunset against Sentinels in Seoul in 2024. They're just that little extra percentage that you're missing, or an Abyss against the Heretics, that kind of situation. Is this where they can finally turn a corner? I believe it might just be. I believe it might just be. And if I'm putting them through here, I'm gonna put Heretics in the final though. And I think that's where they win it. That's what I'm going with. Honestly, let me put it this way. I would love to see Heretics in the grand final in Paris, in the Accor Arena after last year. Because we have never seen a team go to a Champions Grand Final and then make it to the next year. The closest we had was Loud from 2022 to 2023. Are Heretics in a position where they could do that? I think there's a possibility. A few too many things have to go right for FNATIC to perform, whereas Heretics, I don't believe that they're that far off the level. Rian's looked unbelievable, and he's the glue that holds it all together, you know? It's Heretics season, man. They did me a favor with my soul picks last time. I think I just got to go with them again. But it's got to be now. Heretics, I put my life in your hands. Yeah, that's it. Heretics, I put my life in your hands. This is it, man. This is it. I have other potential ways that I see this going. Am I undervaluing DRX here? Yeah, NRG, sure, but I think that group was competitive, but probably a little bit weaker than some of the other teams that we've seen playing on the whole. And this is just where I see it going. Look, okay, hey, this is what my bracket looks like for now. I'll probably change my mind. If you want to know what it ends up looking like, make sure to tune into the stream. You can watch all of this unfold together. I appreciate you all for watching. I've been HazzaJC, and I'll catch you then. Goodbye.